Listen, Alexis. The world is beautiful, vast, and filled with mysteries. However, few men can see. I, the poet Archilochus, will teach you how to see the world. Thus later, you will better know who you are, where you come from, and where you must go. Therefore, I shall reveal to you the most important secret in the universe. The gods to whom you pray every day did not, as you undoubtedly believe, create the world. It was the world which engendered the gods.
At the dawn of time, the universe was lost in darkness. There was nothing, just chaos, night, and a hellish blackness. Nyx, black-winged night, and Erebus, the hellish darkness, were brother and sister. No one knows why, one day, Erebus left his sister, nor why the two halves of chaos split. From the vast hollows of Erebus, night brought forth an immense black egg suspended in the void. The egg cracked, and Eros burst from it. Eros would give the world its shape, and he began by separating heaven and earth.
The earth was an enormous flat and arid expanse covering Hades and Tartarus. Hades was a horrible place, but Tartarus was even more sinister and terrifying. It was the underworld's deepest realm.
In the beginning, heaven and earth, Uranus and Gaia, had 6 children, all giants, the Titans. Ocean was the most restless. The others had only one eye in the middle of their foreheads. The Cyclopes were so ugly their father kept them imprisoned forever in the depths of Tartarus. When Gaia decided to free her poor children, there was a terrible family quarrel.
This incredible myth was born here on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Mythology evolved from these landscapes, these skies, this often dry, rocky soil, bathed in sunlight and washed by the waves of the blue sea.
After Zeus was born, he managed to straighten things out a bit among the mortals on Earth. His birthplace is on the island of Crete at the bottom of a dark cave on the slopes of Mount Tikti. Zeus grew up in this land, every day becoming a little stronger. The bees produced a special honey for him, and Amalthea, the goat, nourished him with her milk. Eventually, Zeus left his beautiful Cretan homeland to rule over Olympus. But later, he would often come back to Earth, driven by love.
The king of Olympus was in a gloomy mood and bored in his palace. He was wondering what to do when a burst of joyous laughter rose up to his mountain throne. Zeus bent over to look at Earth and saw Europa, the daughter of King Agenor, playing on the beautiful sandy beach with a group of young maidens. Zeus drew nearer, hiding in the undergrowth not far from the beach, and fell under Europa's charm. He decided on the spot to seduce the princess, but was afraid of being seen by his wife, the goddess Hera, who was terribly jealous. So he transformed himself into a handsome bull and carried Europa off. He galloped for a long time across the waves. The god Poseidon, recognizing him as he passed, shook his trident threateningly. The next day, Zeus reached a quiet coastline, let Europa slip down off his back, and took on human form again.
Legend has it that the great bull galloped from the sea onto the beach of Matala on the southern coast of Crete. This is where Zeus and Europa are said to have lived an intense, though ephemeral, love affair. Over the centuries, local traditions have linked actual sights to the adventures of ancient gods and mythical heroes. It's said that Artemis liked to swim in the waters of Lake Vulismeni. This minute round lake is less than 100 meters in diameter and located in the center of the little town of Hagios Nikolaos. For many years it was said that the lake was bottomless and that it led directly to Hades. The sad truth of the fact is that legend's all wrong. The lake is actually only 64 meters deep.
Hermes, on orders from Zeus, went to the island of Calypso. What he saw there enchanted him. Seabirds fluttered in the clear sky. Beautiful vineyards loaded with luscious grapes covered the hillsides, and the prairies were filled with flowers. Hermes said to Calypso, "Divine nymph, I bring a message directly from the great Zeus. A Trojan warrior is hiding in your home. 7 years ago, Ulysses was carried by a storm to your shores. Send him away, Calypso. The gods now wish him to return home."
How just like you gods of Olympus. Only you are capable of such cruelty. Do you so envy me for having found love with a mere mortal? Will you hold it against me for wanting to marry him? Who saved him? Who nursed him back to life? When I gathered him up from the sea, he was almost dead. And now you want to take him from me.
The broken-hearted nymph knew she had to obey. She came out of her cave and went down to the shore to find Ulysses.
Beloved Ulysses, cease your worrying. I know what your heart desires, and I am setting you free. Build yourself a raft. I'll give you enough food and drink to last you for the journey, and I'll send you back toward your birthplace, your beloved Ithaca, because the gods' wishes are stronger than my own.
Sailing home to Ithaca, Ulysses landed hundreds of times on the shores of the Mediterranean, encountering the best and the worst of adventures. In Sicily, the cyclop Polyphemus, the god's smithy, devoured several of Ulysses' companions, and from his high lair on Mount Etna forced our hero back out to sea.
He ripped up a bit of mountainside, spun it over his head, and hurled it at Ulysses' ship. The rock landed not far from the tiller and almost broke it. There was an enormous splash, and the great wave luckily carried Ulysses' boat back to his fleet.
The rocks Polyphemus threw from the volcano's peak landed near TREZZA, several dozen meters from the shore. At least, that's the local legend. You should know, Alexis, that the gods are capricious and demanding. They may allow men to live, bear children, and gather good harvests, but in exchange they demand wonderful gifts, and above all, complete obedience.
Archilochus does not explain how the gods can sometimes express their wrath, but when the masters of nature are upset, they're capable of setting into motion all kinds of cataclysms.
Minos had taken hold of power in over 100 cities of Crete. From KNOSSOS, he reigned over the island and beyond it. Thanks to his large fleet, he managed to keep pirates and the barbarian hordes outside his kingdom's borders. He built new cities on the islands and nearby mainland. He gave them beauty and life, and Crete became the home of one of the world's most brilliant civilizations.
On orders from Minos, the architect Daedalus built a labyrinth to imprison the Minotaur. The stone maze was so intricate that if Theseus hadn't had Ariadne's thread, he would never have been able to find his way out after killing the dreaded beast. This incredible monster was the fruit of the unnatural love of a queen and a bull, and was undoubtedly the first animal in the great bestiary of European legend and mystery.
Today, thousands of years after the Minotaur, and thousands of kilometers away from Crete, there is another animal which could be legend or could be fact. On the 29th of September 1952, John Cobb made an attempt at breaking the world speed record on water. He'd selected a long, narrow lake for the trial. The weather was wonderful, the surface of the lake was perfectly smooth, and the crusader shot forward to set a new record. Then the boat suddenly hit a wave that seemed to surge up from nowhere and literally flew into the air. John Cobb was killed instantly.
This dramatic accident is one of the most troubling tales in the Loch Ness case. The stretch of water John Cobb had chosen for the speed trial is located in the Scottish mountains, where the word loch means lake. Loch Ness is the largest lake in the British Islands. It's 38 kilometers long, but a mere 2,400 meters wide. It's part of the Great Valley, the Glen More, an ancient fault that was carved out by the glaciers that stretched from the Atlantic to the North Sea in the Quaternary period.
Loch Ness may be known worldwide, but those who expect it to be an impressive or mysterious sort of setting will be disappointed. The lake stretches through the Scottish countryside where nature is, if not joyous, at least friendly, and where it would seem to inspire melancholy more than fear. As for the waters of the lake, they're neither black nor even really dark, but beneath them lies one of the planet's most troubling mysteries.
The story really begins on May 2nd, 1933. That day, Mr. and Mrs. John Mackay claimed to have seen two odd humps emerge from the waters of Loch Ness. They were on the road that had just been built on the lake's northern shore when they saw the thing. It's not just chance if the first observations coincide with the opening of the A82 motorway. Before the road was built, it was rather difficult to reach the lake shore. The local newspaper reported the Mackays' sighting, and crowds flocked to the loch, especially since ancient Scottish chronicles include numerous tales of a monster living in the lake. Everybody's on the lookout, and many people claim to have seen it.
In November 1933, Hugh Gray immortalized on film the image of a curved something swimming at the lake's surface. It's hard to say if it's a picture of a monster, but the following month, Malcolm Irvin filmed an odd wake for almost a minute. The most famous photo was taken in 1934 by Dr. Wilson, a London surgeon, and indeed we can see that it shows an animal's neck emerging from the water. But there are no landmarks. Nothing proves the photo was taken at Loch Ness.
Nonetheless, over the years, sightings continue. Most seem serious and credible. There might indeed be something in the lake. But sometimes certain observations and descriptions are so fantastic that skeptics have a field day. The whiskey made on the shores of Loch Ness is said to be able to make anything at all floating on the lake's surface look like a monster. Doubts, however, don't discourage either full-blown expeditions or simple observers. All you have to do is settle down on the shore, keep your eyes on the lake, and be patient. It has been scientifically calculated that you've got to be on the lookout 350 hours to be more or less sure of seeing something.
The true specialists know the best spots. The bay beneath the castle of Urquhart is very popular. Nessie, that's the monster's nickname, has been seen several times from here. In July 1955, Mr. McNabb even photographed an animal moving below these walls. Although the lake's average depth is 130 meters, at this spot there's a trough that's 300 meters deep. Other observers prefer a spot near Foyers, or at the lake's extreme northern tip, Doris, where the monster's been seen several times.
Despite the curiosity it's generated and the multitude of observational expeditions, some of them highly sophisticated, there's still no concrete proof, such as film, photos, or remains. We still can't say with certainty whether an unknown animal is living in the lake. The environment around the loch and the lake itself account for this. The rivers and streams flowing into the lake drain a heathland. Topsoil washes easily into the lake, where it remains in suspension, making it almost impossible to make underwater observations.
The volume of the lake is another factor to consider. In all, over 7 billion cubic meters of water have to be checked. The water is cloudy and cold. Even on the hottest summer days, the temperature at the bottom never exceeds 5 degrees centigrade. Finally, the shores of the lake are rather steep, so it's hardly likely that the remains of a dead monster would wash ashore. To try to get a better picture of the animal, all we can do is try to confirm the observations, such as the significant one by Mrs. Moyer in 1936.
It was drizzling slightly. The loch was grey, the sky was grey. The creature was a very dark grey colour, contrasting clearly with the lighter background of water and sky. The monster was facing in the direction of Inverness and didn't move. It was about 10 metres long and had 3 humps. The body was long and thin, and the head small.
This kind of account has given rise to a stereotype. We most often imagine the monster as a kind of large prehistoric animal, or to be precise, a reptile of the Mesozoic era, the Plesiosaurus.
Lacking any concrete proof about the secret, we can still examine the lake environment to analyze the various theories about the monster with a critical eye.
The Plesiosaurus theory is hardly tenable, given the site and the observations. The Plesiosaurus was an egg layer, and it had to lay its eggs on land. It would at the least leave tracks, if not eggs. And given that the Plesiosaurus was a reptile that lived in warm regions, one would hardly expect to find one in the Scottish climes.
In 1982, electronic engineer Robert Craig formulated an interesting hypothesis, but one that was very disappointing for the monster's supporters. Robert Craig noticed that the Scots pines flourishing on the lake shores sometimes fell into the lake. The wood eventually soaks up so much water, the trunks sink. Craig theorized that under the water pressure at the lake bottom, part of the pine resin may be forced out of the wood to form a sheath around the trunk. This resin coating would prevent the water in the wood fibers from escaping. As the tree rotted, pockets of gas would form inside, turning the resin-coated trunk into a veritable float, and bringing it back up to the surface, where the gas pockets would explode, sending the trunk to the lake bottom forever. This ingenious theory may well explain the mysterious wakes and odd shapes seen on the lake's surface, but it can't account for many of the sightings.
The most interesting theories are those that think Nessie may be a member of an unknown animal species. We may not be able to get a clear picture of the monster, but we can at least get a general outline. The fact that Loch Ness is now a freshwater lake doesn't help us much. Loch Ness used to be a fjord that was cut off from the sea several thousand years ago. Sea animals may have been trapped in it at that time. And the lake is still connected to the sea by the Ness River and by another river and the Caledonian Canal.
On the other hand, we can be almost certain that Nessie is carnivorous. The lake waters are poor in aquatic plants and plankton, and it would be hard for several large herbivores to survive in it. But the lake is teeming with fish, particularly salmon. French scientist Jean-Jacques Barlois has estimated that given an average salmon weighs 5 kilos, and that the fish population is evaluated at 13 million, there are 65,000 tons of available biomass in the lake, enough to feed 150 monsters weighing 1,200 kilos each. All serious observers agree that if there is a monster, there must be a group of them living and reproducing in the lake.
Until we're able to solve the riddle about the inhabitants of Loch Ness, the lake will continue to exert its power over our imagination. Everyone has his own vision of Nessie. Generally, we imagine him to be peaceful and rather fantastic, a kind of modern dragon, a gentle monster of contemporary legend. Norway, several hundred kilometers northeast of Loch Ness, also has its monsters. But the country itself is so beautiful that one immediately wonders if this is really nature or a fairy tale.
This road, twisting up the mountainside, is called the TROLLSTIGEN, Troll Road. It leads to a series of impressive mountain peaks, the TROLLTIGEN, the Troll Peaks. And in the heart of these summits lies a sheer mountain face 1,000 meters high. It's called Trollvegen, Troll Wall. There's no doubt about it. We're in troll country.
If you stop at the edge of the Troll Kingdom, nature reveals something about these strange characters that fill Norwegian folk tales. Trolls are enormous, fat, and often covered with moss and shrubs. They can have up to 9 heads, and when they're angry, their heads can explode. Their strength, comparable to that of 50 men, is matched only by their cruelty. It seems they have a taste for the flesh of disobedient children. Fortunately, however, there's always a happy ending.
Once upon a time, there were 3 goats named Bouquet la Barbichette. They were on their way to the mountain pastures to fatten up. But in Norway there are lots of streams, and to cross this one they had to cross the bridge under which lived an enormous, horrible troll. His eyes were as big as pewter plates, and his nose was as thick as the handle of a felling axe. The youngest, Bouquet la Barbichette, adventured onto the bridge. Click, click, click went the goat's hooves over the bridge. "Who's scampering over my bridge?" asked the troll. "It's only me, Bouquet la Barbichette the younger, on my way to the mountain pasture." "I'm going to gobble you up," replied the troll. "Oh no, I'm so little. Wait until the middle Bouquet la Barbichette comes along. He's much bigger than I am." A little later, the middle Bouquet la Barbichette came along, and he too convinced the troll to wait for his bigger brother. Finally, the biggest Bouquet la Barbichette came along. Thud, thud, thud went the bridge. Because the goat was so big and strong, his steps made the bridge echo loudly. "Who's pounding across my bridge?" screamed the troll. "It's me, Bouquet la Barbichette the big. I'm going to gobble you up." "Come on then, I'll poke your eyes out with my horns and crush your bones with my hooves." He charged into the troll and butted him into the stream.
Bouquet la Barbichette the Big joined his 2 brothers in the mountain pasture, where they lived like kings. In fact, they never came back down the mountain again.
In Norway, although nature may indeed inspire some of the legend's meanest, ugliest monsters, in reality no one could really fear them. These fresh, luminous landscapes are too reassuring. In other European countries, however, there are mountains and forests that are just as beautiful, but darker and more austere and ominous. Some of the folk tales from these regions are real nightmares.
I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears in the beauty of the scene. Before us lay a green, sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills crowned by clumps of trees or farmhouses. In and out among these green hills, the road disappeared as it swept around the grassy curve or was shut out by the strangling pine woods. Beyond the hills, mighty slopes of forests rose up the lofty peaks of the Carpathian.
These lines are from Jonathan Harker's diary. They set the stage for a work which Oscar Wilde described as perhaps the most beautiful novel of all time.
Within stood a tall old man, clean-shaven save for the long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot without a single speck of color about him anywhere. He held in his hand an antique silver lamp in which the flame burned without chimney or globe of any kind. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward, and holding out his hand, gripped mine with a strength that made me wince. The effect was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man. "Count Dracula?" I asked. "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house."
In his famous novel, Bram Stoker places Dracula's home in Zegerland, north of the Transylvanian mountains. It's no accident that the story of the vampire count takes place in Romania. The peasants in these regions believe deeply in many folk legends concerning death and ghosts.
Here they're called Strigoiu, Nosferate, Moriu, Muroni. Each has its own characteristic and evil power. Here, a frog crossing one's path could be dangerous because the Muroni are often said to be reincarnated as frogs. Certain spirits are easily appeased. To obtain the good graces of the Staffi, who love to eat, you only have to leave food and drink on their tombs every Saturday, the day of purification.
Nosferate are harder to please, so you'll need to take drastic measures. Rip the heart out of the cadaver, burn it, and scatter the ashes on the tomb. When night comes, watch out for the pricolich. These little cousins of the werewolf kill domestic animals and gorge themselves on their blood, which helps them keep their fresh, rosy complexion.
A vast ruined castle from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky.
Myths about vampires exist around the world, but Romania is the only country where the dead, in search of blood, are said to take the forms of animals. But, contrary to popular belief, never that of a bat. Similarly, one never finds garlic hanging from the windows in Romanian homes. Nor is the cross considered a very effective means for repelling vampires. The preferred method is to use the power of witchcraft.
At the end of the 19th century, in every village here there were still witches who could cast spells over these evil creatures. They used either one of two techniques. Either they drove a nail into the deceased's forehead, or they coated the cadaver in fat from a pig killed on St. Ignatius's feast day, 5 days before Christmas.
In Romania, the term Dracul means evil spirits, and by extension, vampires. It's also the name of an historic figure, a man who lived here in the 15th century, Prince Vlad Dracul, who was the defender of Transylvania and who conquered the Moldavians. In 1437, he soberly called himself
Vlad, son of the late Prince Mircea, lover of Christ and autocrat, great voivode and sovereign dominator, master of all the country and of the regions beyond the mountains.
Writings from that time provide several very precise details about acts committed by Prince Vlad, which account for his reputation.
The town of SIGHISOARA, in the Bistrița region in the heart of the Carpathian Mountains, still trembles at the memory of the prince's cruelty. He had his enemies buried up to their waists, then they were used as targets. He impaled people, and if they moved too much, he also had their hands impaled to keep them from gesturing. He had a gypsy boiled alive for stealing, and made the man's family eat him. One St. Bartholomew feast day, he had 30,000 men killed. In 1462 in Shilta, he executed 25,000. He beheaded his enemies, then he made other enemies eat the heads. They were killed in turn. He boasted that he had himself killed 23,783 people on the shores of the Danube River.
In Romanian, drac means demon. The terror with which Vlad ruled over the country is probably the reason he was considered the vampire of Valachi. But that's where the resemblance to the legendary bloodthirsty vampires stops. Although Prince Vlad held bloody rituals at night in his castle in BRAN, this was the perverse madness of a mere mortal.
In the Carpathians, at the time of Vlad Dracul, people feared nightfall. At night, the monsters come out, and the evil spirits awaken. When the sun goes down, nature cloaks itself in mystery, inspiring some fabulous tales.
This forest is unlike any other. Not only is it enchanting, it's enchanted. The beauty of Broceliande conceals an invisible realm. Night is about to fall. Best not tarry, because the forest can be the scene of mysterious phenomena. Long ago, in the heart of this forest, lived a very pure young maiden. She was an orphan and lived alone among the plants and animals of the forest.
One day, the devil, hoping to trouble the young girl's spirit and strengthen his power over mankind, filled her mind with languorous daydreams. She spoke to her confessor, who advised her to always keep a light near her bed. One evening, she forgot to light it, and the devil, under the cover of darkness, took on human form, slipped into the girl's home, and as she slept, had carnal knowledge of her.
In the morning, the devil had disappeared. Some time later, the young girl realized she was pregnant. When her son was born, she named him Merlin. At birth, Merlin was extremely ugly and hairy as an animal. Luckily, he'd inherited some extraordinary powers, including being able to change his appearance. He grew up in the forest and quickly learned all its secrets. He knew every tree and every forest dweller. At that time, the forest was filled with some strange characters. It wasn't uncommon to meet elves or fairies admiring their reflection in the pools or playing in the clearings. Merlin enjoyed being with them and sharing tricks.
Merlin became a young man. He was far from his home, walking in a part of the forest he didn't know, when he had an unexpected encounter. The young woman on the edge of the fountain was of incomparable beauty. Merlin learned that her name was Vivian. Vivian and Merlin spent the entire day together and never saw the time pass. Merlin relied on all his magic to charm her, offering her fabulous gifts, conjuring up a castle and a feast with ladies and knights wearing sumptuous costumes. Vivian was delighted and promised to love him in exchange for a few secrets.
Merlin, however, had other things on his mind. He had often to go to England and give support to young King Arthur, who certain barons didn't recognize as their legitimate heir to the throne. But Arthur had been the only man able to free the sword, Excalibur, from the anvil in which it had been imprisoned. When he returned to Broceliande, Merlin met Vivian in the hollow trunk of an old oak tree. "Dear sweet friend," she said, "won't you teach me some new games? How could I, for example, put a man to sleep for as long as I pleased without his ever waking?"
Fully understanding the danger of her request, Merlin decided to teach her other tricks. He told her 3 magic words which could protect her from being possessed if she carried them with her. She took careful note of Merlin's words because, as they say, woman is more wily-wise than the devil. After defeating the Saxons, King Arthur's knights had nothing to do and were growing bored. Merlin offered them a new challenge, the quest for the Holy Grail that had been lost in Brittany. The Knights of the Round Table swore to abide by the rules of highest chivalry. Then Merlin left them. His thoughts were elsewhere, with Vivian, the woman he loved. They walked in the forest and sat down in the shade of a prickly shrub.
"Sire," Vivian said, "I still know nothing of the most essential thing of all."
"Lady, what thing is that?"
"I want you to teach me how I can enclose and hold a man without a tower, wall, or bars, so that he might never escape unless I so wish it." Later, much later, Arthur started to worry because he had no news of Merlin, and he sent his nephew Gawain to find him. As he rode through Broceliande, Gawain saw a sort of translucent vapor before him, and heard Merlin's voice saying,
While I was sleeping at the foot of the prickly shrub, Vivian made a circle with her wimple around me where I lay, and repeated her spell 9 times. When I awoke, I found myself in the most beautiful and most enclosed room that ever was. O lady, you have deceived me if you do not remain with me.
"Dear sweet friend, I will often be with you and hold you in my arms."
Thus not day nor night passes when I am without her company, and I am more crazed than ever because I love Vivian more than my freedom. As maddening as it may have been, Merlin's fate is nothing compared to that, several centuries later, of 3 children from Gévaudan in France by the name of Jeanne, Marie, and Gabrielle.
Gévaudan is one of the most ancient lands in the world. These mountains rose out of swampy plains during the Paleozoic era, 200 million years ago. The earth took on a new shape by transforming rocks that were already billions of years old. Fallow fields, clear waters, thick woods, and arid plateaus. Nothing, or almost nothing, has changed in this wild country for centuries. Gévaudan looks today as it did 200 years ago, during its 1,000 days of blood.
The beast struck for the first time one early summer's day of June, 1764. When the beast had gone, there was practically nothing remaining of the body of 14-year-old Jeanne Boulet. The young shepherd girl had been eaten alive. She was buried without religious rites because only shapeless bits of her flesh had been found among the grazing sheep. For 3 years the beast stalked the region, leaving behind a trail of horror.
August 8th, 1764, parish of Puy-Laurent, 15 years old, sex female, eaten alive. Late August 1764, village of Chélar-l'Évêque, infant, sex male, eaten alive. September 1st, 1764, village of Chaudierac, 15 years old, sex male, eaten alive. September 6, 1764, village of Estrée, 36 years old, sex female, throat cut, partially eaten.
Then the beast was seen for the first time. Witnesses saw the attack. They ran to help the victim, but it was too late. Several days later, at sundown, a young boy from the hamlet of Choisinet was coming home from the fields with his flock. The beast struck again, ripping open the boy's stomach and eating him.
In 1764, the beast struck more than 20 times. Bishop Gabriel Florent de Choiseul-Beaupré, Lord and Governor of Mende, Count of Gévaudan, claimed it was a divine punishment.
A ferocious beast, unknown in our climes, appears suddenly, as if miraculously, without one knowing from where it might have come. Everywhere it appears, it leaves the bloody traces of its cruelty. It leaps on its prey with incredible agility and speed. It moves to very different and far scattered spots. It generally attacks those of a tender age and of the weaker sex. But why depict the evil qualities of this monster of which your own misfortunes have all too well instructed you? It is natural for you to conclude that this evil only befalls you because of your sins. The Holy Scriptures provide many examples of punishments similar to those we are experiencing.
What had those living in the austere hills of Gévaudan done to merit this God-inflicted plague? Everyone could find some unconfessed sin, some cause for bad conscience, and fear gripped the villages. Would the bloody horror ever cease?
January 1st, January 2nd, January 6th, January 7th, January 12th, 14th, 22nd, 23rd, and 30th, 1765. The beast kills 9 times in a single winter month.
People tried to reach home before nightfall. They avoided keeping their animals in isolated spots. They lived in hiding at home, hoping not to see the beast, because it had already struck on several occasions near homes. When the rain came down from the mountains, the anxiety seemed to seep into their very bones. Abbé Pourchet describes the feelings in the area.
The desolation was extreme. One couldn't find a shepherd to keep one's flocks. The people in the country didn't dare leave their homes except in armed groups. One didn't dare go to fairs or markets. One cannot imagine how fear had hurt trade and farming.
Certain people saw the beast, others escaped it, and some even fought it off. It was said that the beast was the size of a year-old calf, that it had the head of a hare, reddish fur, and a black stripe down its back. Some people saw it walking on 2 legs. Others claimed that it resembled a dog, but also looked in some ways like an enormous wolf.
Wolves thrive in the Gévaudan mountains, and they're despised because they regularly raid the herds. They're blamed for all sorts of evil, and fairy tales and prayers are full of wolves.
Our Father, wicked wolf from hell, sent by Lucifer, fear your iron peril. Clever wolf, stay from me, pass by. Amen. The children of Gévaudan don't like wolves, but despite the irrational fear the animal inspires in them, they usually manage to chase wolves away from their flocks with stones.
The beast continues its carnage. The flocks are frightened of it, but the beast doesn't attack sheep. The father of little Claude Bicaret d'Auvers foolishly sent his 9-year-old to the pasture to fetch the oxen. When night fell, the boy still hadn't returned. His remains were only found 3 days later after a thorough search. The beast had eaten him. It was then said that before eating him, the beast removed the boy's coat and shirt without tearing them.
Such disturbing details increase with the number of crimes. More than 10 times, the beast killed its victim in a way that shocked the imagination. It cut off their heads.
On April 7th, 1765, the Easter bells of Laclos tolled and smothered the horrified screams of 17-year-old Gabrielle Pellissier's sister. The beast leaped onto the girl's neck, cut her head off, and it thudded to the ground before her lifeless body could fall.
King Louis XV heard of these events in Versailles, and he quickly decided to dispatch the finest wolf hunter to the south of France. For several months, the hunt for the beast was organized and intensified. Despite the rather limited territory to be covered, the hunters were unsuccessful. The beast continued to attack, humiliating the finest huntsmen in the kingdom.
August 9, 1765. Having tracked the beast all day with dogs and wagons, Antoine de Beauterne and the Count of Tournon came back empty-handed to the Château de Bessé. Suddenly there was shouting and screaming.
The beast had followed them, and before their very eyes ripped a young 16-year-old shepherd girl's throat out. In his report to the State Ministry, the king's harquebus-bearer blamed his failure to find the beast on the layout of the region.
I have never seen a country like this one or as rough. The rivers and mountains are very old and very steep, cut with ravines and filled with boulders or covered with thick woods. One climbs from the valleys into the mountains by long meandering trails, most of which are impassable for man or pack animal because of the precipices encountered on them. There are only several small towns and centers in Gévaudan, all of them widely scattered. If there is a beast of another species than that of the wolf which is causing these ravages, neither the wardens nor myself have yet been able to discover it.
In fact, Antoine de Beauterne and all those hunting the beast are hunting a wolf. At least 8 times someone claimed to have killed the perpetrator of all these crimes. The beast was thought to be dead, but every time the nightmare started again. Wolves were literally decimated at this period. At least 200 were killed during the hunt for the beast.
Oh, wolf, you're piling up troubles. It's the price, my son, the price. The gods bear heavily upon those in high positions.
Of course, no one in Gévaudan knew the words of George Sterling, but they often wondered if the beast were in fact a wolf. But why would a wolf suddenly attack shepherds rather than sheep? Why this sudden rage and this preference for human flesh over all others? And how could a wolf, no matter how strong it was, carry off a human body at a run?
Outside, the snow is falling, and everyone knows wolves will start to hunt closer to the villages. The other day, one leaped on a dog and devoured it, but that doesn't surprise anyone. Occasionally, someone thinks it might be a bear said to have escaped from its trainer during a fair or market. Anyway, it could only be a trained bear, because winter has arrived, and the beast continues its attacks. A wild bear would have gone into hibernation.
The beast moved. There were several crimes not far from the Abbey of Mercoeur. Rumor has it that a man is hiding there, calling himself my lord. Once a favorite of the king, he had been chased out of Versailles for his perverse behavior. Perhaps these walls once sheltered a rapist, killer of adults and children under the sway of murderous impulses. In the month of June 1767, the attacks finally stopped. How many villages, homes, and roads in Gévaudan are forever stained with the blood of the beast's victims?
Over 100 deaths were counted, and more than 160 attacks. Some of them took place on bridges, paths, along roadsides, or in isolated woods or pastures. Others took place in the very heart of villages. Mothers looked on helplessly as the beast carried a child away, and children saw their mothers eaten alive. When the beast was flushed out, it was driven towards the hunters. Jean Chastel was waiting on Seigne d'Auvergne, reading litanies to the Virgin in his Book of Hours. He saw the beast approaching, seeing clearly that it was the beast, but trusting in Our Lady, he wanted to finish his prayers. He then closed his book, slipped it into his pocket, folded his glasses, and picked up his musket. Kneeling, he shouldered his arm, aimed and fired, and the beast fell.
And on that day the crimes ceased. The death of the beast was like a rite. It reflects this tragedy in which legend blends with history. Regardless of what the beast was, whether it was some fabulous creature, a werewolf, or a wild animal trained by a madman. Within the collective memories of Europeans, it joins the gnomes, the gods, and the fairies, born of their contact with the harsh and mysterious beauty of nature.